welcome to Dignified Resilience. I'm so excited to have Wajahat Ali as my guest today. Wajahat Ali is a New York Times contributing op-ed writer, a TED speaker, an award-winning playwright, a recovering attorney, as I saw online, and a former consultant for the US State Department. Ali has given myriad keynote speeches around the world, from TED to the Aspen Ideas Festival to Google to UN to the New Yorker Festival. And I had to actually Google which play, when it says playwright, he's the author of The Domestic Crusaders, which is the first major play about Muslim Americans post 9/11, which was published by McSweeney's and then performed off Broadway and at Kennedy Center. And Waj is also a Peabody nominated producer of the series, The Secret Life of Muslims, which is a series of short form first person documentary films featuring a diverse set of American Muslims. He was also the lead author and researcher of Fear Inc., Roots of Islamophobia Network in America, the seminal report from the Center for American Progress. And the bio is long, but it matters to me because I want to set the context and various reasons why I'm so happy to have Waj on my podcast today. And I thought it was very funny and original how the description on the Lavin agency stands for Waj, and that is that he's a, besides the official, titles, he says he's a new kind of public intellectual, young, exuberant, and optimistic, as I quote. He speaks on the multifaceted American experience, covering our growing need for cultural unity, racial diversity, and inclusion to fight forces of hate and division. In hilarious, politically up-to-the-minute talks, Ali shows how to learn from and join what he calls the multicultural coalition of the willing, the emergent generation poised for social change. My God, they did such a good job of describing this. It sounds
I did not write that. That's like written by my mother, I think. To make me sound, I mean, my wife listens to that and she goes, I want to marry this Wajahat Ali. Who is
right?
this guy?
No, yeah, you see, you're too humble. But
No.
one of the, before, obviously, hi, Waj, and welcome to Dignified Resilience. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And speaking about dignified resilience, that's your life. We're, I guess you could say, honoring the anniversary of that resilience and life and massacre in Bosnia. It's a story that oftentimes is forgotten, but a story which still echoes. And I was in Sarajevo. I was lucky enough to visit Bosnia a couple of years ago, and it's stunning to just walk the streets, right? And you see this beautiful mosaic of cultures. I went during Ramadan, just happened to be there during Ramadan. And so here we are in the streets of Sarajevo opening our fast. And there were some Turks brought some whirling dervishes, and there were the adhan, but then there was also a church, and there were also like tourists. And then amidst it all, there was, as you know, there's graves of young men who died not too long ago. So anyone who has endured that or survived that has a dignified resilience. And I think you, with your history, kind of embody that. So thank you for having me on your show.
Waj, thank you for saying that. And I was going to note that I did notice that on July 11th this year, you did make a retweet on your big platform through social media of a tweet which was talking about the commemoration of 25 years of the Srebrenica genocide, which, by the way, was just a culmination of the whole campaign of Bosnian genocide from 92 to 95 to exterminate Bosnian Muslims, Bosniaks. So I appreciate that precisely because I'm not sure how many people in United States are aware of it, considering how much specifically Bosnian genocide continues being inspiration for far right, from Breivik to Christchurch, which clearly cite and stereotypes that were used by Bosnian Serbs in the manifestos, etc. So I think that I appreciate that and your awareness and raising awareness about it.
Well, I could have done more. I thank you for saying that, but it's very little as it was happening. And unfortunately, and this is not an excuse, but an explanation, with the blitzkrieg of chaos that we have in the United States of America, where I'm forgetting the latest stupid thing that Trump said because I still have demon semen or demon seeds still stuck in my head from yesterday, where this administration is promoting a quack doctor. who was against masks and talking about alien DNA and demon semen and hydroxychloroquine. And then you see the corruption, and then you see what's happening, of course, with COVID and the recession and happening across the countries. It's still important for us to keep in mind that the past still haunts us to the present, especially with the Srebrenica massacre. And like you said, there are people who love the war criminal Milosevic, and they said he didn't go far enough and that he was a nationalist and not a war criminal. And this is like, a smear campaign against him. And people like Anders Breivik, I'm glad you mentioned it, very quickly, people forget that was 9 years ago. He killed 77 people, left behind a 1,500-page manifesto in Norway because he wanted to punish Europe for being pro-Muslim. And the sins of Breivik echo not just across Europe, but around the world. Like just last year, Christchurch, that was a terrorist who went to New Zealand, was inspired by Breivik, and said the same thing. I have to punish Muslims because they're trying to replace us. And then a few months later in El Paso, Texas, Riada, a man was inspired by the Christchurch killer to murder Hispanics because he said they were the invaders. So, I mean, I know we have a lot to talk about, but I feel like when you mention that, why this still echoes, right? Like, first of all, the people of Bosnia, it's amazing because you see the joy, but you also see sadness. There's still trauma there. I mean, it's when you walk, you see graves amidst beauty, and you talk to people, and there's still trauma. The people, everyone knows someone, and then you talk about dignified resilience. We often talk about resilience when it comes to jobs or when it comes to relationships in America, but what do you say to a people whose family members were systematically exterminated? And then that extermination is being lauded and praised by extremists 25 years later. And also on the flip side, people forget that what radicalized some Muslims in Europe 20 years ago was what was happening to Bosnian Muslims. And they said, look, quote unquote, the West hates us. And that's how Al-Qaeda, the flip side of the extremists, two sides of the same coin, were able to inspire a young generation of jihadis in Europe. And they said, look what they did to the Bosnians. So that's all I'm saying is that the past is connected to the present. And if we really want to talk about dignified resilience, we should listen to people like you and Bosnian Muslims who have found a way to find meaning and hope and dignity despite all the suffering.
I really appreciate that, Waj. I mean, the name of this podcast, Dignified Resilience, came out precisely out of my contemplation in December last year when Nobel Prize for Literature was awarded to Peter Hanke, who is a strong denier of the Bosnian genocide. And I was literally, I mean, I did an interview with Foreign Policy. The night before it, I was thinking in my head, because there were different responses within the Bosnian community of what we should do, and the West doesn't care and they don't care, which is true. But I was thinking, okay, they're going to give him the award on 9 December. What are we going to do on December 10? What is going to be our step the day after? How are we going to respond? So I was literally putting my son to sleep. And I was thinking about it. And then it was just like aha moment, like it's resilience, but it has to be something that will not make us look like victim. And it was just like dignity, and then it was dignified resilience. So, and then I started talking and thinking about it more, and just made sense because that's what I think people from my community and my family actually had exhibited throughout the years already. And the only two things that I would like to add, considering you started this, and this is very a sensitive topic for all of us, is that genocide denial is on the rise. We have had continuous reports, and Srebrenica Memorial Center did one this year, and we have Europe Islamophobia reports done by think tanks from within Europe. So it's not like it's status quo and there's no more violence and this. No, we have the same ethno-nationalist ideologies that started this war that are on the rise, and in the political conjuncture in Europe, which is very like leaning towards right wing in so many countries, it gets all the more important for people in diaspora, for all the allies, if I may call it that way, wherever they are, to just raise awareness, because these are facts that are internationally established by bazillion institutions. So it becomes all the more hilarious when this denial is perpetuated.
And I think you're saying hilarious tongue-in-cheek with a tremendous irony, because it's dark humor. And you know, this is just what you said just reminded me that when I was there, and we had this conversation with both people who are experts and people who live there. it seemed like there was a kind of a stalemate, but the fear was that there was tension in the air. And so when you have tension in the air, when it's still simmering, when the ghosts haven't died yet and still haunt us, and this memory is being weaponized and used through disinformation and propaganda, and being seen as like, an attack on European identity, and no, there was no such thing as Islamophobia and a massacre, and they're just spreading it and making you feel guilty. You sit there and wonder, as the right wing, both in the United States and Europe, is propagating their replacement theory narrative that says that Muslims and Jews and blacks and immigrants are trying to replace the Western civilization, which means white, or their concept of white. And we're seeing this focus specifically against immigrants and Muslims, both here and in Europe. You hear what Trump says. You wonder, God forbid, it always begins with words. I was in Auschwitz 2 years ago, and my travel guide, whose grandfather survived Auschwitz, he told me it always begins with words. It always begins with language. People become dehumanized, become rodents, rats, swarm, invaders, the Middle Easterners, the criminals, the MS-13, and how quickly the dehumanization of people can easily rationalize a society into putting them into camps, locking them up, putting kids in detention camps separated from their families, or killing them. And then fast forward just 25 years later, with the memory still lingering, and like you said, instead of all of us agreeing that this was a horrible genocide and we should not be repeated, now people are saying, but was it really a genocide? Was it really a genocide? I think it's a lie. And so it's just something, I think, for the people who are listening, I think the reason why, look, me and Riada didn't have an outline, so we just started talking. And so I apologize, Riada, for like giving you my thoughts on this. I didn't want to trigger you at all. I know how sensitive this is, but I think people just have to connect the dots. I think that's what, oftentimes when I'm asked to come on and comment, they ask me to connect the dots, and I'm trying to connect the dots for people, is that what seems foreign to you is something which actually will come home. And if you don't believe me, I'll end it on this. If you were paying attention to the streets of Portland, if you were seeing the federal police that came out, unidentified, literally beating people up, putting them in unmarked vans, that's the war on terror. And people were fine with the war on terror 20 years ago because the enemy was Muslims. And we created the DHS, and we militarized the police, and the world was our battleground. But that war on terror has now come home to the suburban streets of America. The battlefield are our communities, and the enemy are American citizens protesting police brutality. So if you think this is not connected, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, and I do want to add just a few things which I caught while you were speaking. First, of course, I'm not an American citizen. I'm here and I'm learning. But now that I live here, I think about so much history which I have to learn and grapple with. And I think that what was also important is also that you said, or at least their concept or conception of white, because Bosniaks happen to be indigenous Muslim population in Europe. We're not in first or second generation of immigrants, as is the case in majority of Western Europe. And even that existence is denied to us. We have been slaughtered by the Bosnian Serbs, by their ideological conceptions as a genetic material that's a waste. And war criminals like Biljana have been convicted as war criminals. So like, for me here, it's so complicated to have Srebrenica genocide commemoration and look at this color of my skin, which happens to be white, and then read everything that's happening here, and everybody who might be listening, and just kind of to complicate things in terms of both diversity and plurality of Muslims and the kind of dehumanizing practices that happen, like you say, as a pattern, but also with different regional manifestations. And it makes me so much more, I guess, humble when I live here now to keep learning about different contexts and horrors, and to just, with humility, shut my mouth up and
No, you shouldn't shut your mouth though, because I'm glad you. I deliberately talked about the whiteness aspect, hoping that you'd pick up the thread, and I'm glad you did. It was a deliberate.
I'm gonna edit this part because watch, I'm so it's really complicated. This time in history in the United States is something that I'm keeping myself out of. I just had the commemoration. That's what I'm talking about. You know,
Oh
like
yeah.
trauma that triggers back because precisely the weeks before the commemoration, we all relive this because we so many things. We dig into archives from like classified documents, and it's just trauma and re-trauma and re-trauma. So that's why I always say the first and the most important way with which I will approach anybody that I talk to is humility, and
Yeah.
hope that other people come to me with humility because it's complicated, if that makes sense.
No, of course it makes sense. Viet Nguyen, who's a writer, he's an immigrant, Vietnamese immigrant, American immigrant, but writes often about the Vietnamese diaspora and the generation that survived the trauma of the Vietnamese War. He has a line which I'm going to paraphrase, which is that you first fight the war and survive it, and then you fight the war in memory. Right, so it's like the war is fought twice, once on the battlefield and then in memory. So it's like enduring and unending. And I it was speaking about humility. What do I know? I'm just an observer, which, as I kept saying, is I can only imagine, and I don't even want to imagine what your generation has gone through. So when people say dignified resilience, and the reason why this prompted this conversation is there's ways of people saying, oh, you're resilient because you lost a job, you're resilient because you're surviving a pandemic, or you're resilient because of what happened to your kid, or you're resilient because of illness. But then when I think about really dignified resilience, that's what inspired me just to start talking about my trip to Bosnia, because it's that generation that you just see them living with hope but also sadness, with joy and life, but also next to a graveyard of a generation decimated, right? And the reason why I would humbly encourage you to speak and write more, and I appreciate the fact that you want to listen, especially this moment in time, is because the story needs to be told. The story is filled with many complex interactions which need to be unraveled, because superficially you look white, you are European, Trump's base will probably accept you, you don't come from those countries, but you are Muslim and your name is Riada. And it goes right up against the narrative of some of Trump's base, because you are the enemy. So you are both us and them. You're an immigrant from a European country that is a scary country because it has a Muslim majority population. You look white, but once you start talking, you're like, wait a second, she's Muslim, and your Musliminess otherizes you both in Europe.
I don't reject, by the way, additionally, I don't reject my Muslimness, but
that's another thing, and you don't reject it, so you claim it. So your Musliminess makes you an other both in Europe and the United States of America.
Exactly.
And even with people of color, then you have some interesting tension, because people of color be like, Riada, you have no idea, you're not black, you're not brown. But then you be like, I know I'm white, but as soon as they know I'm a Bosnian Muslim, I'm not white. And it just goes to show you how whiteness, just like race, is a social construct. And then again, to connect the dots, Irish Catholics were not considered white in this country. Eastern European Jews were not considered white in this country. Italians were not considered white in this country until they were. And then the question then is, who will whiteness accept? It hasn't accepted black people, hasn't accepted Latinos, hasn't accepted South Asians. And it seems, by the way, it won't even accept Riada, who is, I guess, whitish looking.
Live in that world, exactly. Yeah. That's why I want to just keep. This is just both therapeutic and triggering, but in a good way, because there's so many layers to the conversation, and this kind of conversation could not have happened with everybody. I think, even though we have never met, but we've known of each other through friends who are dear friends. So like a friend of a friend must be like somebody who you might become a friend. It's important to feel safe in a safe space, or where I felt that I could say this. There's so many layers of complication, from European far right, United States, like right extremists, and we've some progressive left figures who are very important in the United States. For example, Noam Chomsky. He's a
Mm.
hero for so many people in the United States for so many things, but no Bosniak could ever read anything that Chomsky might say because he's a genocide denier. I do also want to just conclude this by saying how we are a weird for many people, we're an anomaly, and we don't fit into many boxes that people want to put us in any
Mm.
way. And the sadness is because this is such a small community in terms of the destruction that's been going on throughout years. I hope that your listeners, and I know a lot of them are very progressive on in American political spectrum, and I'm just trying to bring nuance, and I just had to mention
Great.
Chomsky because he's such a huge figure, but there's a lot of pain that ideological blindness may bring, and I just urge people to read a little bit more. And that's one of the good things about social media. There are a lot of bad things about social media, which we'll get to in terms of the connection and platforms and being able to put it out there. But you completely honored me and my people, whereas I wanted to honor you and your family. So let's start honoring you and your family, and because that is really important, because there's so many people who have been in a similar situation like you have, and I do want to really talk about it, because there's Holocaust survivor Edith Grieger. She wrote a book, and Oprah did a talk with her, and she's a therapist in California right now. And she said, when people come to me with a trauma as clients, and they say, but I'm embarrassed to tell you about something, you're a survivor of the
Mm.
Holocaust, my trauma is nothing against you. And one thing which I remember from that book, and I put it on Twitter saying not a lot of people might agree with that, is that she said, I never want to measure pain or trauma.
Right.
I want people and my clients to get from interaction with me or from her book is, if she did it, I can do it too.
Mm.
Empowering is that. And it's like, if I did it, she did it. And I'm also saying that because I really appreciate a pattern that I noticed in a few of your tweets, where you put something, I did this interview, I did this podcast, and then you say, hope it helps.
Yeah.
I think that's so thoughtful, and that's precisely the actual acknowledgement of it. Because it's difficult for you to talk about everything that your family went through as well, but you do it because you hope that it helps other people. So
That's one of the intentions. I mean, that's it's no, I appreciate that. And it's very interesting what you mentioned about trauma, and it's something that I've been thinking about as well, because my wife, who I married way up, just like Mustafa married way up. My wife is smarter than me. My wife is better educated. She's better looking. She's nicer. But she's a doctor, a family health practitioner, but she's also an expert on women's health and victims of trauma, right? So my wife uh, has said essentially that, what we kind of went through with our daughter's stage 4 cancer last year was a traumatic experience. And I, having studied trauma, yes, it is a traumatic experience, but I've always been loath to kind of call it that, precisely based on what you said. Is even talking to you, speaking about trauma, trauma, Bosnians know trauma. Speaking about trauma, Holocaust survivors know trauma. At the same time, though, what that the capacity of that one psychiatrist who was a Holocaust survivor, her trauma allowed her to expand her generosity, her kindness, and empathy, right? Not do the competition, or not say, oh, you think you have trauma, let me tell you. Because human beings, and we've mentioned this before on this podcast, like, everyone has their own experiences. Some people have lost a job, which is very traumatic to them. Some people got a divorce, and my friends who've gone through divorce, they'll tell you it's like taking 2 years off your life, for the really disastrous ones, right? Some people, they've lost a loved one in COVID. So we all experience pain in a different way. It doesn't matter if you're upper class or lower class. And some of us experience more pain than others, obviously. But I think we're all human beings who experience joy and pain, different levels of trauma. And I think I've tried to come to peace slowly with the realization that maybe it's okay for my wife and I to say that, yes, that was a traumatic experience, while not dishonoring men and women who live through a type of challenge and trauma every day around the world that we don't experience due to our privilege, right? And because at the same time, it's like me coming from a place of privilege and not trying to stomp on anyone. Like, who am I to say, Riada, let me tell you about trauma? And you're like, word? Really, Wajahat? I'm a Bosnian. So, but it is something where sharing that story of Nusayba, uh, the fact that she had stage 4 cancer last year, the fact that it hit us out of nowhere. She was 2, about to turn 3. The fact that the cancer was all over her liver. We had to find a liver donor to keep her alive. And then just the insane story, right? It was last April. And then the liver transplant, thank God, was September. And then she was declared, knock on wood, alhamdulillah, as we say, cancer-free in January. And then what happened in January? Coronavirus. So it's like we've been living in a whirlwind without stop. And in a strange way, speaking about resilience, this is going to sound very odd to some of the listeners. We are in a much better position than most people who are suffering right now. And I say this knowing that people are really suffering. I'm not saying this lightly. And the reason why we're in a much better position is the disruptive normal that people are adapting to the past 6 months has been our life for the past year. So, I have a conversation in the next hour where someone's like, all these parents are like, how do we deal with coronavirus and our kids? My kids are having a great time. They're like, they never want to leave the house, because for my kids, our last year, Riada, was, will we go to the hospital today? Will we have to stay in the hospital? Who's going to stay in the hospital? Who's going to take Ibrahim to school? The disruption, the trauma on our kids. My daughter had an NG tube. We had to check her tests, right? And so compared to the craziness of last year, in a strange way, this year is kind of chill. And I say that knowing how odd that and awkward that sounds.
No, I think I know. I mean, I can't know what you mean, but I read your article, and there's been a plethora of articles when the lockdown started in terms of, well, I've been to the war zone. How can I my lessons? And then there were some survivors who got angry. How can why can it can never be compared? What we survived and all this stuff. So then afterwards, it was just okay. It cannot be compared, but there are some things that might help people who are in a situation that is confinement and loss and collective grieving, as a lot of psychologists have said. And you wrote an article in New York Times recently where you actually wrote about a few tips that you and lessons, I guess, that I appreciated. Would you mind sharing them?
The funny thing is I wrote it so long ago I didn't even know what I wrote because my brain is. Can you refresh me? I remember I wrote it. Let me see. I'm only saying that because I want to sound intelligent for your listeners. It was a piece I wrote. So this is what it was. It's my toddler survived cancer, then came the coronavirus, and going back to your original question of our intention, we don't want to just share our story as navel gazing, right? Like, here's my story, listen to me. We want to share our story with the intention that maybe our story can reveal lessons that can help people cope and endure the trauma and pain of not only just coronavirus, but anyone who might be going through cancer. Does that make sense? Like best practices, what we learned. We came out on the other side. These are some tips. Hopefully it'll help. And so it's connecting both traumas, the trauma of coronavirus that we're going through right now, and what we endured or enduring is what kind of inspired that. And it was really interesting that people found it really useful. And so what I said was, and this is, again, for those who are listening, this is just my advice, take it or leave it. I hope it helps. We human beings think we are in control. And then something like coronavirus happens. And you think you're in control, but something like cancer happens. And as a father, your job, right? Talk to Mustafa. Like, it's just, most guys are like, my job is to solve problems. I'm the dad. Right? How do you solve a global pandemic? You can't. How do you solve cancer? You can't. And so there's nothing more humbling in life, but at the same time, it makes you feel so powerless that you can't control anything. And so the first lesson is a Muslim proverb, if you will, which is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, which is, tie your camel and then put your faith in God, which means do everything you can in your human power to control the situation, but then you have to let go. You have to let go. And so that's what we did during Nusayba's journey, is because there's only so much I could do to fight cancer. And so I told Allah in my prayers, my thoughts, that I'll do everything I can to save this girl. But then at the end of the day, I'm humbled by this thing called cancer, by the universe in which I cannot fix this. And so then you have to give yourself peace to let it go. And I think that's important, especially during coronavirus. There's only so much we can do. You're a parent, I'm a parent. You're recording this from like your bedroom. I'm recording this from my bedroom, praying to God that my kids don't burst in through the door, which they might any second, right? Uh, we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, but we do what we can and we let it go. The second advice was accept help. And I think that's very difficult for some people, especially myself, people who I think pride themselves on doing things themselves and not asking for help and stubbornness, but we need help. And because we need each other. You can't survive coronavirus and you cannot survive cancer without a community, whatever that community looks like. So ask for help, give help, accept help. It was the generosity of a community that helped save Nusayba. Not just medicine, not just prayers, not just healthcare, but over 500 donors, Riada, mostly strangers, stepped up to give a piece of their liver for my girl. And alhamdulillah, the person who stepped up was an anonymous donor who we now know, Sean. Sean and his wife, Rida, not Riada, who stepped up to help a little girl save her life. So ask help. The third thing is give up on normal. Let me repeat this. Give up on normal. And you, a Bosnian, you know this. When your life is hijacked with a chaos or trauma or a disruption, you create new normals every day. And I heard a lot of people in June, in May say, oh, we're going to get to a new normal. It's going to be a new normal. And I kept telling them, wait on that normal. And now we're almost in August and that normal hasn't arrived. So you give up on normal and you live in the now as much as you can and you roll with the punches. I think there's something about allowing yourself that elasticity and flexibility that gives you a type of resilience also, right? Because there's a lot of people who are just, it'll go back to normal, it'll go back to normal, it'll go back to normal, and it hasn't. Even in a macro sense with Trump, it'll go back to normal, won't it? His new tone, Riada, he has a new tone, and you're like, he has no new tone. This is who he is. Accept the new reality and respond accordingly. That can help you mentally ease into the new disruptive normal with an elasticity that is needed to improvise and be resilient. And then quickly, the fourth thing I would say is, in this chaos, do things that you have control over. So do these small things that you actually have control over, like cooking, like playing with your kids, like certain hobbies. It might seem silly, but if you're in a situation where you literally have no control over everything, we human beings need to feel like we have some domain that belongs to us and something that gives us joy. So you could be like, at least I can sew. The universe can't take that away from me. At least I can cook. The universe can't take that away from me. At least I can watch this movie that makes me laugh. I think that's very important, to lean into joy, to have joy. And then the final thing I would say is trauma, pain, loss. Loss allows us in a very strange way to pay attention to the things that really matter in a way that when we have excess, we don't pay attention. When everything is normal and calm, we don't really give that its due, or we don't really value it, or we're not really conscientious about it. But once it's taken from us, that's when we go, this is what matters. I don't care about the job. I care about my wife more. I don't care that much about fame. I care about my kids' health. I don't care about that time when my father said that to me 3 years ago. I miss not seeing my father during quarantine. And so this is just some helpful lessons. I hope. I didn't mean to talk for so long, but this is what helped us last year, especially when you live as a father with the daily realization that you might lose your daughter. It makes you think. It makes you think about what's really important. And so my daughter's right in front of me right now. I could see them. They're drinking through their Paw Patrol and frozen cups. My son's having a banana. My daughter's having chicken nuggets. They're smiling and they're waving at me right now.
It was her
What's that?
It was her birthday
It
recently.
was her birthday 2 weeks ago. She just turned 4. And about several times a day, both my wife and I several times a day. Even now, I look at her and I go, she's alive. That's wow, she's alive. And what else matters? So you asked me a simple question. I went on a rant. I'm sorry.
No, it's exactly. I mean, that basically kind of is the summary of your article that you don't remember because the best is repeated as well. But it's also basically you nailed the science behind resilience in terms of, well, what is it that makes some people more resilient? And of course, there is no one case because it's not just personality, it's environment as well, and the conditions which allow that support to help and everything you said. I do also want to add a little bit of just adding more knowledge to the listeners that there's, besides the Prophet Muhammad saying that there's a really important notion of sabr in conditions, which is an Arabic word for patience, and sometimes also translated as resilience. It's mentioned, nearly 100 times in the Quran, and it's linked with prayer and the connection of the sabr and the shukr, which is the gratitude. I think it also matters for inspiring an action as well. So
can you say that? You said sabr and shukr, and I'm glad you did. And don't worry, for those who are listening, this is not going to be a religious hour. But
it's important because it's so universal. That's why I precisely want to share it, because just to kind of keep breaking the barriers and stereotypes and share. I read so much about the science of resilience, Watch, because it personally interests me. But honestly, so much of it I get from reading books on spirituality from my faith.
Yeah, of course.
So for me, it's funny. I read something and I'm like, yeah, sabr, yeah, shukr, yeah, we know the benefits of it. Yeah, we know that. So to me, it's funny because it just shows the universality of the main messages from all faiths, I guess. So
no, but you're right, because if you look at mindfulness exercises, it's basically for students of religion. We read it and we go, and I had the same conclusion. I'm like, oh, this is the Tasawwuf Sufism 101: gratitude, patience, breathing, rumination. These are exercises which are helping citizens of the modern world. But if you really just step back from it, it makes sense, because in Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism, these religions and these religious practices go back thousands of years. So it's a continuation of a spiritual science that nonetheless has been perfected and has worked, and is now just being kind of rebranded as mindfulness. But it's fine, it works, right? So if you're not comfortable calling it Sufism, call it mindfulness. And what they said is, with sabr and shukr, again, sabr means patience, shukr means gratitude. There's another saying. There's a famous Sufi sheikh in Islam, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, right? So they asked him, and there's all these books written, and he gives answers. So they say, what are the two keys that open up the gates of paradise? So he said, one key is the key of sabr, that no matter what afflicts you, will the believer have a degree of patience with his creator and with himself and with others. The other key is the key of shukr, gratitude. Despite whatever befalls upon you, as you are in the state of loss, what are you still grateful for? And if you can hone these two keys, like wield them, the sabr and shukr, then you will unlock, figuratively, literally, paradise, which is a tall ask, really is, for people who are suffering. But if you look at resilience and the people who made it and the people who do make it, it's people who were able to have that patience, and the people who, despite it all, still look back and are grateful for what they have, which is a tough. It's tough. When I say this, I want to acknowledge also that this is not easy.
Yeah,
it's
that it has to be built over and over and actively.
It's like a muscle. You have to hone it. And there's days of darkness. There's days of, if we're going to go Arabic, let's throw another word in there, waswasa. Waswasa means the evil whispers. It's like Gollum. It's like when you're at your low point and the demons come and say, give it all up. What's the point? It sucks. The waswasas attack all of us. They attacked me during what happened during Nusayba's journey. How can they not? Will she survive? Why is this happening to us? What's going to happen in the future? We did everything right. Why is this happening to a 2-year-old girl? The waswasa, my business was about to start off. Why did the pandemic hurt me? Why are other people doing well during the pandemic? Why did my marriage fall apart during the pandemic? Why am I lonely? And so this can eat away at a person. It can really, it's like a quicksand. And once you go in that quicksand, it's very hard to come out. And so we were very lucky, Sarah and I, that in both of us, both independently and together, we didn't allow ourselves into the waswasa whirlpool.
Mm.
And each time we saw ourselves getting there, we just said, you know what, this happens. We don't know why it happened. Cancer happens. It's another thing that happened to our daughter, but at the same time, a lot of good has happened. We have a family, we have a home, we have a life, and we have medicine, we have healthcare, and inshallah, we'll get through this. And that mindset, I think, really helped us as a family survive this with I think sabr and sugar. And we're very lucky for it. Very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that spiritual balance and spiritual grounding is so important. And for me, it's Islam. And I'm always saying, whatever works for you, just seek it because the science shows it. But I think that it's a continual work. And one of the questions that I was going to ask you, and I don't know how much time we have because I know you have to go to a different interview. You're a busy man. Is that how do you remind yourself of that resilience? Because we it's like me, and it's funny because I usually don't wear these because it makes a weird sound. I wear bracelets with verses of the Quran on it.
Mm.
And so I'm not into tattoos or stuff like that, but the kind of person I realize the visual reminders help me so much. So randomly throughout the day, so I have sabr here, and I have verily with every hardship comes ease, which is the verse from the Quran 94:6.
Mm.
It's very important for me when it's tough time to just look at it and to remember. And then here is Alhamdulillah, which is another way to like thank God. And then I have here all is well, because
Oh, nice.
I did all those personality tests, which made like a recommendation that I need to keep telling myself all is well to remind myself.
What are you? Are you INTP?
Oh my God. Did so many like anagrams and stuff like that. And I did the Gretchen, what was it, like the Happiness Project, and
Yeah.
in all of them, it just happened that I am, which is so normal considering my background, that I'm very prone to like anxiety. And my husband calls it Balkan paranoia, where no matter what, like I think that there's an evil thing lurking from the corner, and there's no way that something that's good might last, because where I come from, like.
Well, it makes sense. It's survivor trauma.
Exactly. So he says it's Balkan paranoia. I'm like, no. So, but you know what? So we have these constant conversations whether sometimes being a pessimist is good, because then when something good happens, you're like, wow, what is that? So I don't know.
So you are like me, and Sarah is like Mustafa.
Yeah,
Sarah is like your perpetual, like Sarah is this like kind-hearted woman who empathizes with everyone, and if it starts raining pebbles, she'll make a game out of it, and she'll be like, let's avoid the pebbles. And I'm like, it's raining pebbles, woman. And I'm an optimist also, but I'm more of the pragmatist. I'm more of a cynical optimist than my wife. I'm a little bit more mistrusting. I'm a little bit more cautious. I'm more bold in my career in what I say, but I'm a little bit more cautious in when it comes to trusting. I'm way more cautious when it comes to trusting, because not comparing, based on my 20s, long story short, same things happen. I guess you could call it trauma. Just a lot of stories that most of my peers have not gone through when it came to just losing everything, and just it was tough. And so that forged my path in a different way. So for me, it's always fight or flight. I'm in a perpetual fight flight, and I have OCD as a gift from my father, which is an anxiety disorder. And so I'm always in the car with my foot on the gas pedal, even if the car is in neutral, with the wheels spinning. But the irony is, when the poop hits the fan, I am very good in chaos. I'm excellent in crisis. I'm very calm. I'm the guy you want in your corner. I'll keep my together. And the irony is that even though there's like raging tempest inside my mind, outwardly people are like, Wajahat Ali, you're very calm. And then during the bar exam, during law school, people later told me they sat next to me because they liked my calming energy. I'm like, are you guys crazy? Do you have any idea what goes inside my head? So I think you and I are similar that way. What does Muslim call it? Balkan paranoia. Yeah, I think it's just like, we are always waiting for the demons to come through the door, and we never want to get caught unprepared. Whereas my wife is just like, oh, look at the demon. He must be hungry. Let's feed it. And I'm like, it's a demon. So it's a nice balance.
But I did hear in another podcast that, you know, Sarah, that you don't think people can be nice just for being nice, and how Sarah says no, they're nice. So I want to tell you, Waj, people can be nice. Sarah, I'm with Sarah on this one.
Yeah, I'm trying to be. I'm trying to get a lesson. My always thing is like, why are they so nice? Why are they so nice? What do they want from me? They must want something. And she goes, no. Sometimes people just want to be nice. I'm like, no, there has to be an angle. She goes, there's no angle. Sometimes people are just kind. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've changed in the past year. I forced myself to change because of what happened with Nusayba. Seeing so many people who are strangers reach out on Twitter, on email, on Facebook, strangers who've kept up with their journey, money that was raised for us behind our back, the 500 strangers, people who, I'm telling you, without exaggeration, people message me saying, I hate your politics. I hate everything that you tweet. I hate all of your articles. I'm praying for your daughter. And so once you're confronted with that, it forced me to change and realize that there's still goodness in the world, and people still have the capacity and desire to be good in this day and age. You know, it's sometimes we need opportunities and moments that ask of us to be good, you know? And I feel like there's many of us in these toxic times who want to be good again, who want to be kind, who want to be generous and decent. And I think there's something about Nusayba in particular, a girl, a 2-year-old girl, a 3-year-old girl, a baby, which really just, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I told, and I could see them. It was like a phantom punch hitting them in the chest. They said, how old is she? I said 3. They're like, oh, you know, and like, to the point where like a very educated adult said, I didn't even know kids could get cancer. They're just like, something like hits them. They're like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to a girl? And so I think there's something about Nusayba as a, if I may, as a character in the story that generates so much worldwide empathy, that a baby girl getting hit with cancer who might not survive, we're going to rally around this girl. At least this girl will survive, inshallah. And so alhamdulillah, she's running around right now beating up her brother. So there you go.
And that actually also confirms the power of the story. And I think that was one of the beautiful manifestations of the good that can come out of social media, because a lot of bad stuff can come out of it as well. And I do want to celebrate Sarah, and I love the way that you talk about her, and I hope to meet her. And she is also super successful physician, and I do want to mention that she also, I loved how you said, wrote that she introduced 4 years ago impacts of systemic racism in healthcare in her required Georgetown course for all.
Yes.
And I do hope as well, like you said, that will happen in other courses as well. So kudos to Sarah. I inshallah hope to meet her.
You should actually have her on your podcast. She's better than me.
And you know, it's on my list, but I just...
She should. She's great because she could tell you from 2 different aspects of it, which I think are interesting. Number one, as a Muslim woman, as a woman of color, as you know, there's I mean, this goes for women across the board. The double standards in life say that the test of a woman's success is marriage, right? The test of a man's success is money. So you can be a 38-year-old woman who's just crushed it in life, but if you're single, they go, oh, poor girl. My wife was divorced twice in her 20s. But was very resilient in her outlook in life. And then I think her third marriage, but also she's a woman who spent her whole life really helping victims of trauma. And the victims of trauma are not just the people she met in Kashmir or in Haiti. There are also people in DC when she worked at the clinic. She's a family health practitioner who believes in community health. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because a couple of years ago, her and a few others are like, we need to talk about racism in healthcare. How can we not? And I think I could say this, I hope she won't get in trouble. There was pushback at Georgetown University, but she persisted. And now the course that they were teaching for, medical students, now the medical school is like, this needs to be taught across the medical college. And so it just goes to show you that just having sometimes 1 or 2 people of color in a situation who care and who fight for something. And now Sarah, like, her extra job is to like help chair this. So Anyway, that's my wife. You should talk to her.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We'll do that. So Waj, I know you have to go. 5 short questions for
Yeah,
the.
and I'll answer them in the way I have not answered the others. I'll be brief, I promise.
No, I mean there were literally bazillion other questions that I had on my mind to ask you, but I know this went so nicely in so many other ways that we'll do it for at another time, inshallah. Um, it's nice to talk to you, is what I'm trying to say. So this is something that I do at the end of my podcast, kind of to make people feel even more closer to the person behind just and beyond the professional work and scholarship. So the first question is, which for you is quite like pertinent. Once the current emergency is over, whatever that end up being, because we're like living on a different planet compared to Europe and elsewhere, any temporary awareness will also disappear. Is there something that you would not want to forget from this pandemic period and lockdown, Watch?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. I would not like to forget how we need people. I'm a loner. I'm an only child. Even though people think I'm very extroverted, I'm not. I think it's important to walk away from this knowing how important a community is, how human connection is necessary for our happiness, and how we are all so connected. The essential workers that we otherwise forgot, and who we don't pay and who we don't give healthcare. Without them, we would not have our essential lives. And it is important for us to remember that we're all connected, and that we can all be humbled, and that the essential worker who was forgotten was the one who gave us our packages and our food, and the doctors died saving us because some people wouldn't wear freaking masks. And maybe we should give healthcare to everyone. If people had healthcare, they'd be healthier, and if people had more money, they'd be better off, and this rising tide would have lifted all of us. So the thing I want to really remember is we're all connected, and we all need a community. And it's because, look, people are missing it. People are missing going to concerts, going to parks, going to movie theaters, just having a barbecue. People are missing just talking to people, right? And so that's something that I hope we never forget, myself included.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you said. Which of your personality traits, Waj, has been the most useful? Not the best trait, but the most useful.
I'm resilient. I am. I can take a beating. I can take a beating more so than most people and still keep going and be useful. That's one. But the one that's been really useful, like I've mentioned before, is I'm good in chaos.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
More so than most. More so than most. I can keep a level head. I won't see me crying in the corner. I'll get it done. And I think that's I mean that it's connected to my OCD, I'm sure, in some way, but that has helped me. I've kept my cool for the past year. Even during the cancer, my wife said that. It says, like, you never saw me losing my mind, getting angry, bawling in the corner, like shouting at the heavens. I got things done.
That's really good. Good to have a parent and a husband like that, let me tell you. When you have 30 minutes of free time, how do you pass that time? Like free time, like what is free?
Yeah. So don't judge me. Don't judge me. You can judge me. Three things I do. I try my best to keep reading. So I like to read. And or I want to say I like to watch something, but not really. I just scroll through Netflix and I get exhausted without seeing anything.
I know.
But then the third thing, which is, you can laugh at me, is I invest 30 minutes when I have time to play video games. So I play video games after the kids sleep, and through the pandemic, I finished 2. I'm playing my third one, and after this one, I'm gonna play another one. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that video games will play a big part of my life once my boys get to that age.
Oh yeah, one more year.
One more, is it? So yeah. What skill or craft would you like to master?
What would I like to master?
What skill or craft?
Ooh, that's good. Ooh, I'll give you 3. Um, you'll laugh at them maybe. I would like to learn more languages. The people who are gifted at, I made a mistake. I could only speak like three barely. Um, I would like to pick up an instrument and learn one before I die.
Mm-hmm.
I have stubby fingers, but if I could just get one.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always admired people who dance, not and people who dance well, not even professional dance, like my friends who could just cut loose on the dance floor and just get into it and like not care, but they still look good. I was cursed with two left feet. I'm terrible on the dance. I'm so bad that people look at me and go, we didn't think you were that bad, but you are bad. If I can learn how to dance, which is I don't know, I would really enjoy it.
You know it, Waj. At least you know it. I know some people in my proximity who are bad dancers and who don't know it.
Is it Mustafa?
Yeah,
Yes.
he
But
doesn't
does he
know he's bad, but he
does
doesn't
he
know
have Turkish arrogance? He has Turkish arrogance.
no,
He's
he just is completely not conscious or thinking about it. He doesn't even know what the good dancer or a bad dancer might be. He doesn't, that's
but
not in his part of the brain. Like,
that's I envy him. That's fantastic because that's
ignorance is bliss, let me tell you.
yeah, ignorance is bliss.
For him, not for me, because I like dancing. So,
I'm fully aware of how atrocious I am. Let it be known.
yeah, so I just tell him like shake left, your right, shake your hips left and right, and he does it, but it's even anyway, it's okay. That's the let that be
It's
the
love. You have love.
and I do just want to say before fifth question is that you have a new book deal that if you want to tell us shortly about it, but when you posted a tweet, I have something to announce. I kid you not, and don't judge me. Besides, like thinking, okay, he got a new job and he's gonna tell us now, and I hope to, hear what it is. I thought like you got so creative, and you need to make a YouTube channel or cooking show.
Oh,
If that no,
yeah,
I'm not serious. Like and I'm like thinking, is this like you're cooking bazillion things that look so
yeah,
good, and I
yeah.
also show that to my husband as well. Like, look what watched it, like you
That's
should.
why I have to stop. I have to stop posting photos because my male friends are like, "Yo, you're
Like,
making us look
putting the
bad," and
standards, upping the standards. You're like,
yeah, my homies are like, "Yo, my wife's on my case. It's a
oh my,
pandemic.
like
You
seriously,
stop."
do all that? Like you?
I yeah, so these I started off cooking. That's the one thing I picked up during the pandemic, just to save time and effort and energy. So I hadn't cooked anything, and I started with my mom's recipes and my mom FaceTiming me, and then you keep doing it 3 or 4 times, and then I got confident, and then I take after my mom. You have to cook a lot for a lot of people, but the one thing I'm good at, I think, is I'm limited with 4 stoves and an oven. So I keep the 4 things going. And then while those 4 things are going, I think of some other stuff. So that's my one strength is I can balance multiple dishes. And then I have to cook a lot at the same time because time and kids. And then I'm getting more ambitious. And then my wife, who I call like this, she has white girl taste because she grew up in Florida and she like doesn't like spices. But my wife really loves these dishes.
Okay.
So she's like, I don't,
I'm
because she
telling
likes
you, the market is
yeah
waiting for you.
yeah so
When you finish this book, put me in a
she
note.
said it also.
Do it.
She said do a cookbook where like you talk like about like a dad learning how to cook, and you do like 10 chapters on 10 different dishes and give a story about each
Yes,
dish
exactly. And
and
I'll
then
tell
give the
you what,
recipe.
like, look, there are people who are, if she said it and I noticed it, and I'm like, because I see her thing and I'm thinking of Chrissy Teigen or Teigen or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, I think that really you should take this idea seriously once you finish the other book. Do you want to tell us the title of?
Yeah, the book that I have to finish in a couple of months and start is called "Go Back to Where You Came From and Other Helpful Recommendations on How to Become American," which is a big title, but it's fun. It's going to be a memoir polemic, and basically it gives you top 10, tongue in cheek, 10 ways to become American. It goes back to our conversation. How people of color, oftentimes who are American, are always seen as the other. And I'm going to talk about hopefully some universal themes, but through a very specific story of being a Pakistani Muslim kid, the son of immigrants, growing up in a country which sees him as both us and them. And after 9/11 sees him as the enemy, even though I've, not ISIS and Al Qaeda, and how I have to apologize for the criminal actions of people I've never met, but at the same time, how to build bridges. And so it's going to be blunt, it's going to be honest, it's going to be funny. And each chapter will have a specific story, which I think will be interesting, but then it gives me an opportunity to talk about what we've been talking about in this podcast, to connect the dots. And hopefully it'll be 250 pages, and I hope it'll be entertaining, but also helpful.
Exactly. Looking forward to that. And then to the other book that he will write that now
Yeah.
because we're pressing him. So that's at fifth last question. Are any of your friends completely opposite to you, or are most of them similar to you?
It's a very good question. Growing up, I would say opposite because I went to an all-boys Jesuit Catholic high school. I was a token Muslim. I was, one of the only few brown people. At the same time, those were superficial differences in a way because they were similar in the sense that I think we were goofy, curious, creative, hopefully smart. Nowadays, when you have kids, as you know, your social circle gets smaller. But I feel like we have a good gender ratio dynamic. But I'm trying more. I mean, my network is wide. So I would say growing up in the Bay Area, diverse Bay Area, I've been very lucky that if you want to look at differences when it comes to ethnicity, gender, and religion, yes. When it comes to closer circles, I think in the past 2 years, it's leaned more Muslim and American and South Asian. And that's something that, my wife and I, she's same. She grew up in Florida, very diverse, where she was like the token brown and token Muslim kid. That's something where we want to merge it more and more. We want to merge those, how we grew up with our close circle, we want to diversify. So we're getting there. That's very intentional on my part, especially for our kids.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Well, we have a play date once this is done.
Yes.
We said that that's going to happen. I know we have places to be and book to write, so all the more and bigger things. There were a lot of other questions, especially now that you were mentioning all the Muslimness. We were going to talk about Rami. I hope he wins Emmy. He got nominated. We're talking about the Hulu series that I really like.
That was great.
Despite some weird moments where even I was like, what is going on?
There are some weird moments.
Oh my God, which was pushing the barriers. But I do really hope that is one of the first Emmy nominated, but we need more and as many Muslim stories.
Right.
Rami, when people and a lot of Muslims got on his started complaining and bashing, he just said this is a story, story, not the story. So we just need more and as many. So that said, I look forward to reading your book, staying in touch. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And thank you for letting me just vomit stuff out there, cut anything you want. But this was very good. I really enjoyed this conversation. Congratulations on your podcast. I hope it grows. And then I would love to speak again.
Thank you, Waj. And